by my esteemed colleague, Krista De La Cruz, the Director of Business Development. And we are really glad to have you here with us. Got a great group for this webinar. And so, like we always say, as you're coming in and getting situated, if you will, take just a moment and say good morning or good afternoon to us with the chat and tell us where you are watching from. And we will get started in just a moment. So welcome, everyone. And let me remind you, if you haven't already, to grab your printed copy, hopefully, of the handout, because we'll be using this today, as we always do, when we have our friend Randy Mayuex leading us through a book briefing. And hello to those of you from North Carolina. Glad that you could be with us. And everyone in the country is thinking about the East Coast right now, especially North Carolina and Florida, as we know that the devastation from Helene is still being dealt with, and Milton is about to be here. And so we are appreciative of everything you're doing in local government to make things better and safer for the people around you, but we're thinking of you as well. Well, Krista, we got another great book briefing today, and I want to just ask you, what are you kind of looking forward to about hearing from Randy on this?
Well, I'm excited to learn from Randy. I enjoy the auditory learning experience. So, and love that Randy always adds in extra, so we're getting what's in the book, but we're also getting a few of tie-ins to other books or recent studies and things like that. So excited to hear Randy's take on a few things as well.
For sure. This is a great book. I, separate from Randy, had been reading it, had completed it. And then Randy and I were talking, and he said, I just read and made a presentation on this book that was better than I thought it was going to be. And this was the book by David Novak, How Leaders Learn. And Randy, welcome to our Wednesday webinar. Of course, always great to have you with us. And you and I were talking before the start how one of the things he does in this book, he doesn't really say learn from books, but he quotes books over and over. It's obvious that David Novak was a person that learned from books. You and I have had this discussion. There's a value that is lost sometimes in other modes of learning that we get from reading books. You're a big champion of that, so am I. Why is it so important, in your opinion, just before we get started here, that people learn by reading?
Mike, thanks for the question. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Krista. Good morning, everybody. Warren Buffett famously says that all of the people that he knows who are successful are readers. So there's a beginning point right there. And he carves out time every day in his life to read. There's research that says that people who read books, not listen to books, but read books, especially if they mark it up, mark in the margins, and then revisit their markings, retain more. They score higher scores on tests in college. There's something about reading a book that engages the mind, engages the pen. There's research that says you do better taking notes on paper than you do on a computer screen. And so there are lots of research that says engaging in words on paper really matters. I read my books on Kindle app, so I'm betraying that, but I end up with physical handouts that I go through very carefully. And so the research is clear. It's better to learn from audio books than not do that. It's better to learn from YouTube than not do that. But the best learning that occurs based on the studies and research is reading books. And Mike, I want to mention that I did my vacation in Philadelphia this year with my wife, and we went to the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall and Valley Forge. But at night, I read the Pulitzer Prize winning book, by David McCullough, 1776. And that added such a context to our trip. So read books. You'll be better off if you read more books.
Yeah, and you can't go wrong with David McCullough, that's for sure. Well, Randy, I don't want to delay you anymore. Thanks again for being with us. Talk to us about this book, How Leaders Learn.
Okay, here we go. Let's begin with who the author is. Every one of us has partaken of the products that he worked to provide. He was the CEO of Yum, and before that, he worked in PepsiCo. So if you've ever eaten at Taco Bell, if you've ever eaten at KFC, if you've ever eaten a PepsiCo or had a PepsiCo product to drink, this man has helped you pick that out, and he developed it. So he's got some real success stories at Yum Brands where he was the leader. So David Novak led a company, led them well. They went far, and they made great progress both in his earlier days at PepsiCo and then as he ended up managing branches and then ended up in charge of Yum Brands. Here's something that really speaks highly of him. He cared about, you see, Taco Bell and KFC, they're not owned by the company, they're franchises. And it is a common experience that franchise owners are kind of ignored by the company. David Novak was famous for the way that he treated the franchise owners as partners, and he treated them better than other types of franchise businesses. So there are lots of pluses about David Novak. And I also want to mention that his wife suffered from diabetes, had some real health struggles, and he himself had a couple of pretty embarrassing miscues and failures. And so he's very vulnerable in this book, talking emotionally about his wife and talking about his own failures. And all of that is important to think about this really top-notch leader who is telling us how leaders learn. I'd like you to turn to page 9 if you printed out your handout. Grab your pen and notice the full title of the book, How Leaders Learn, Master the Habits of the World's Most Successful People. And I love that phrase because the most successful people have habits. And this is a habit era. The best-selling business book of the last few years, every single month on the New York Times Business Bestsellers list, is Atomic Habits by James Clear, a book that I have presented many times. By the way, if you are new to what I do, this handout, if you will reread it once, we're going to go back to the front page later, but it starts with what is the point? Why is this book worth our time? A few pages of the best highlighted passages, and then the lessons and principles, and then my lessons and takeaways. So this handout is following my template on how to pull the best stuff out of a book. But we're on page 9, and these are what I call the thesis quotes of the book. These are the critical quotes in the book. I'm going to read all of them, so get your pen handy. When you see it in larger font, that's my emphasis. Here we go. The most pressing task is teaching people how to learn. That's a quote from Peter Drucker, the business guru of the last century. And now all of these are from the book, and that one was included in the book. Every successful person I've met in my life, and I've spent time with many of the most successful, has learned the discipline of learning. Circle that phrase, the discipline of learning. It is a phrase to put into your mind. It requires discipline to keep learning. They're like Lara Croft on Tomb Raider. Probably not where you expected me to go next, he says. When you're playing the game, you can unlock a special survival skill called avid learner. Boy, I love that. Now I'll keep reading these quotes. These are the thesis quotes. Even for people who are naturally curious and interested in solving problems, being an effective learner who can turn their learning into action takes insight and practice. This book is your practice manual. A learning discipline isn't just something that's nice to have. It's essential to your success. I want to inspire you to become an active learner and hone the skills that will help you grow and succeed. I want to help you become an active learner who's somebody who seeks out ideas and insights and then pairs them with action and execution. They learn with purpose. The result is greater possibilities for them and the people around them. We all know people who are old at age 27 and people who are young at age 88. The people who stay young their whole lives are the active learners. And it's what we learn after we think we know it all that counts. So many things pop into my mind after reading just those quotes. I remember Mike Mowry interviewed, I think it was Mike, James Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense, retired general. I presented his book, Call Sign Chaos. And General Mattis said that when you are taking men into battle, there is the great danger of losing life. And he says, one of the things that I always did was read about the battles that occurred on the very ground where we were going to do battle. He said, I would read every book I could find on that. So reading books. And he said, if I can learn something about the fight there from a book, I can save a human life that I didn't have to learn from experience. So I think of that. And I think of, you probably all know the acronym VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. In the book that I read that in, it was by Bob Johansen. It was a book about the future. In that book, he said there's a difference, and this is also from research with Army generals, there's a difference between a problem and a dilemma. A dilemma does not have a solution. And so to think you can find a solution is a fool's errand. But when you have a problem, a solution is findable. And so study and find the solution. So I think all of those are worth remembering as we delve into this book. Now, if you'll turn to the front page, at the bottom of the page, what is the point of this book? You don't yet know enough. Not yet. Keep learning. And if you are a leader or you aspire to lead, active learning is an absolute requirement. We're going to read later that he talks about a good leader sees his or her gaps and seeks to fill the gaps. Well, the word gap may be a nicer word than deficiency or flaw, but what it means is there's something that I'm not doing right. There's something that I don't yet know. I need to fill it. And so either in my knowledge or my skills, I have a gap to overcome. And so you don't yet know enough, not yet, keep learning. And then at the top of the page, why is this book worth our time? Number one, this book is a great compilation of wisdom from leaders in multiple arenas. He brings in insight from every conceivable arena in this book. Number two, this book provides a serious list of books to add to your reading list. He doesn't necessarily provide the reading list, but he keeps quoting from good books. Number three, this book is a reminder that we can and must learn from everyone and anyone from anywhere and everywhere. Now, let me just back up and make the obvious point. Look at the title, How Leaders Learn. And so what it says is that leaders keep learning. They are lifelong learners. And so their habits to help you be that kind of leader. Now, I'm going to fly through this next section. Turn to page 2. These are the best of my highlighted passages. When it's in big font or bold, that's my emphasis. These all come right from the book. And I encourage you to reread these whole sheets, maybe even today, but certainly in the next few days. I'm going to read quite a few of them. We're going to go fast. Number 6. I realize that the overconfidence that can come from having a specific pedigree can also keep you from being open to ideas and possibilities wherever they show up or whatever the source. He, by the way, really spent time learning from people in what he called the front line of work, people who took the things out on their routes, people who served the customers, not people in the offices behind the walls. And so learn from anybody and everybody, and especially from the people doing the actual work. He learns from each chapter has kind of a person or an entity that is he interacted with. So number 7 really appealed to my grandsons who were both under the age of 10. I'll share how the members of the Dude Perfect team improved their ideas by being truth tellers to each other. So he even learns from Dude Perfect, and especially my oldest grandson got really jazzed about that. Number 10, being curious about and open to and appreciative of ideas means being curious about, open to, and appreciative of people. So this is people-centered learning, people helping learning. Number 14, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, the famous book. The book you're reading now is structured a lot like Carnegie's. The chapters are short, driven by stories, and gathered into parts based on an active theme. So he copied somewhat the format of one of the most famous nonfiction books ever, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Number 15, Eric Hoffer, the American philosopher, wrote in Reflections in the Human Condition, in a time of drastic change, it is the learners who inherit the future, because behind every idea is a world of possibility and a brighter future. So the learners will inherit the future. Number 16, this is about his own background. This is fascinating. I lived in 23 states by the time I was in 7th grade. His dad worked on mapping projects, and so he had to keep moving to map different places because the 15 families in the project would move together. We took our neighborhood with us, so we had community even with the constant moving. It took me decades to see the connection between those experiences and how I operated in my life and career, especially as a leader. Being an active learner means being a historian of your own life. Boy, do I like that. And I read that and thought back of the books I read, when I read them in my life, what I learned when, the kinds of changes in my reading habits. I kind of went through a little history of my own learning curve. That was fascinating. Turn to page 3, number 18. Look, David, you've got to take the initiative to make friends. This is from his mom and dad. Don't hang back and wait for the other kids to come to you. We're only going to be here for a few months, so make them count. So he learned to make friendships and connections quickly, and he didn't hang back because he couldn't hang back because he was going to be gone before you know it. That's interesting. Now look at number 21 from Condoleezza Rice. If you don't remember her, she served on George W. Bush's cabinet. She is a renowned pianist. She is a sports enthusiast. She is a Black woman, and she is a brilliant woman. Condoleezza Rice. I always say something that's maybe a little bit paradoxical, which is that I'm actually glad I grew up in segregated Birmingham, she told me. First, you're going to have to be twice as good to succeed in a segregated environment if you're Black. Second, you may not be able to control your circumstances, but you can control your response to those circumstances. That is echoing the greatest book I've ever read, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who talks about, he survived the death camps of Nazi Germany. He talks about how they can take everything away from you except your response internally to the horrific circumstances. Those lessons of both self-respect and personal responsibility influenced how she responded to challenging circumstances. I'm not going to be able to read with our time constraints, even all of the ones I planned. So put a check mark as you go through beside the large font quotes, number 24, and the bold ones. The next one I'll read is 29. The risks of staying where you are in your knowledge, of standing still and missing out on all the learning and potential of a new environment chosen carefully are almost always worse than the risks of making the move. I just read, it was a famous British actor, and I think a comedy actor, but I don't remember, who said, don't ever use a noun to describe yourself. I'm not an actor. Use a verb. I act. I learn. Use a verb to describe yourself. That way you can keep doing new things. That's kind of that idea there. Turn to page 4. Top of the page, number 31. An expert is simply somebody who knows a lot about something. And you can find those people in any number of places and positions. Every company is filled with experts. No matter the question, the answer is almost always somewhere in the building. Look at number 34. One of the best experts, the best teachers I've met, he says, is Warren Buffett. At one point he asked, David, you're so passionate about your brands, but do you ever talk about what's wrong or what could go wrong? He told me that if I addressed the things that could go wrong over time, they would trust that I was looking at our business in a balanced way. We're very attuned today to all of the things that need to be done to near perfection in Florida up to North Carolina after Hurricane Helene, and now today, Hurricane Milton barreling down. Boy, they want to do everything they can right, and they want to find out what they ended up doing wrong for the next hurricane in the next hurricane season. Number 35, if you want people to share their know-how with you, you need to spread know-how. So you share what you learn from others. So they share, you share. You create a morale and an environment of high morale, of high sharing. Number 42, I enjoy going out of my way to create psychological safety. So people can tell me things that I have to hear to get to the right answer. Now, Amy Edmondson, Right Kind of Wrong, the Fearless Organization, coined the phrase, and did the research on psychological safety. It's simple. People have to feel safe to say what's on their mind without worrying about facing ridicule or, disregarded by others. So a story from her friend Mark Kelly, Arizona senator and husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. This is a great story. In 2011, Gabby Giffords was shot during a public event in the face. If you don't know that story, Google it and read it later. When Mark was in a room with a team of doctors trying to understand the surgical options for Gabby, he put the doctors in order of seniority, and he made the youngest go first and then backwards. He didn't want the answers or the possibilities or the truth to be swayed by politics or hierarchy. Alexa keeps that story in mind whenever she's trying to get to the right answer with the group. You take the people that are not the top of the hierarchy. You let them speak first, because their wisdom would be discounted likely, or not even allowed to be shared, or they would be too intimidated. So that's a great story, the way Mark Kelly did that. All right, turn to page 5, and I've got to move fairly quickly. Number 55, I learned 2 lasting lessons. The first was that when people with experience share their opinions with you, listen. I wasn't learning as I should have been. The second lesson, work for people and organizations that understand you can't grow and innovate if you don't take risks and sometimes fail. So you have to take risks. You will sometimes fail, and that's how you keep learning. Turn to page 6, number 59. Put a star beside 59. The world is full of great ideas that get stuck in people's heads because nobody is making the time or space or effort to really listen to them. When people are brave enough to share their ideas and passion and insights, the very least you can do is listen. Better yet, you can listen well. The whole psychological safety thing is a person in a position of authority, higher up on the hierarchy. It oozes a desire to learn and listen from everybody. And the person who is a know-it-all, they have nothing left to learn. The CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, says, don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. Don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. And so the person who already thinks he has or she has everything figured out, that person is not going to listen to the people. And so the things stuck in people's heads are going to stay in their heads because they don't share them, or if they share them, they're not heard. So that's interesting. Look at number 64. This was a regular practice that he followed. I often ask, if some hotshot came in to take over my job, what would she do? I love to ask, what would you do if you had my job? And so you ask, what would this hot shot do? And then you do it. So it's fascinating to think that way. Number 78 on page 7. I believe in running an organization based on the assumption that 99.9% of people in the organization want to do good, not bad or even mediocre work, but good work. When you say to somebody, I believe you have something to offer, I know you want to help the team. There's research about teaching children. And if a teacher, when they start writing papers, starts correcting it and simply writes in red and simply corrects it and doesn't have a prelude, the student is demoralized. But if the teacher adds this paragraph at the top of the page, I believe you have great possibility. I see something good in your work. Let me help you make it better. The person receives the criticism and learns from that far better. Number 82, if you're going to coach yourself to success, you need to know what you're coaching yourself toward. And number 87 at the bottom of the page, what new challenge have you tackled in the last year? What did you learn to do new? What did you tackle in the last year? And then page 8, one more, number 95. It's hard to ask a simple question if you haven't brought the issue down to its simplest form. Okay, those are the best of the highlighted passages. We've already read the thesis quotes on page 9. Turn to page 10. At the top of the page is the information about David Novak. I've already told you. Here are two stories. The book is filled with stories, but here are two stories that jumped out at me. The first one, David Novak learned from and copied McDonald's. Remember, he was running Taco Bell. He copied McDonald's with some changes he made at Taco Bell. Here was a key one. He figured out that McDonald's was making plenty of money from breakfast. So you may not remember this. Taco Bell at one point did not serve breakfast. He copied McDonald's success and started serving breakfast, and it was a big hit at Taco Bell. A second story that jumped out at me is one game after a really bad game with the Patriots early in the season, when they started the season with a few losses. Bill Belichick, the coach, brought the team out into the field. There was a hole dug in the practice field. He took the football, the game ball from the game they lost. He threw it in the hole, and he told everybody, bury the ball. And they all threw dirt to fill up the hole. And he said, we have now buried our bad beginning of the season. We're starting anew. So a very tangible, let's start over. And by the way, they won the Super Bowl that year. So I love that story. Now I'm going to fly through these major points. We still have not developed enough good leaders, not nearly enough. Here are 3 essential building blocks of learning. They learn from anybody and any experience that has something new, interesting, or valuable to offer. Everybody has something you can learn from them. Next, they learn to maintain an open, curious mind. Circle the word curious. It is a common trait of learners. And positive relationships, because we learn the most from and with other people. And they learn by doing the things that need doing or that will make the biggest difference. So you learn not just by hearing or input or reading, but by doing. To learn, it helps to teach and spread your ideas. All along this journey, I didn't hoard my ideas, I spread them. To learn, it helps to teach. The most essential learning skill is listening. Now, in order to be a learner, you have to work on self-discovery. I have discovered my strengths and my gaps, and I know where I need to beef things up. A couple of observations about the book. He is plenty transparent with a nice dose of humility about his mistakes. And by the way, he came up with Crystal Pepsi, which was a disaster, worse than New Coke. So he had some major mistakes. And this is partly a distillation of the wisdom from many of his friends, peers, and podcast guests. He has a popular podcast. Some tangible steps to take. First, circle this. I'm near the bottom of page 10. Identify and acknowledge your gaps. To spot their gaps, active learners ask questions like, where do I need help to accomplish my goal? And what could derail me? And then find the right experts and ask them as many questions as possible. The bottom of the page, 3 lessons you can learn from a crisis. 1, you will make it through. That's a lesson to learn. 2nd, you can avoid a similar crisis later. And 3rd, they teach us how to survive and even come out stronger and better on the other side. Turn to page 11. Focus mode and diffuse mode. We especially need the diffuse mode. How do we get there? We give our minds a break. We let them wander and jump from idea to idea and thought to thought until eventually the connection is made and we have a breakthrough. Here are some things that matter. Morale, group morale, company morale. If people are not jazzed about showing up and doing the work, their morale is low, you're going to have trouble. Ask people. They would ask, how did you find this out so fast? And I'd say, I asked. He asked people who did the runs of Pepsi beverages, and he talked to people at the front line of workers. He asked people. If you can't get delivery trucks out on time, hop on a route with delivery person. Have some truth tellers around you who will tell you what you need to hear, but you don't want to hear. And study winners and study crisis management. And then look at this section near just above the table of contents, hinted at and demonstrated throughout the book. It really does help to read a lot of books. And I've got just a few of the authors that he quoted from. All of those are authors I have presented their books through the years. Turn to page 12, and on the right side of the page, 7 lessons and takeaways. Number 1, never, ever stop learning. My older brother just had his 80th birthday. He is reading biographies and histories constantly. He's got a PhD in an area of science from Texas A&M, but he is the epitome of lifelong learning, and he stays vibrant. Number 2, don't just learn passively. In case you hear it, seek to learn actively. Number 3, it takes serious effort and constant attention and constant recognition to put your people first. Number 4, seriously, read a lot of books and learn from the books you read. Number 5, network constantly. Number 6, do not disregard the experience of those who came before. They know stuff. Honor their experience and learn from them. And number 7, try to get on groups or boards of leaders who can teach you and help you keep learning. Be around people who stretch you. Well, that's it. How leaders learn, master the habits of the world's most successful people. Mike Mallory, back to you.
Wow. Thank you, Randy. Man, what an inspiring book. I've read this book and yet now I don't know if I want to read it again or I just want to read this handout again. But there's so much that's inspiring about this. And this idea of a lifelong learner really hits me hard because, I don't know if I've ever shared this. My mom is 97. And it must have been 12, 13 years ago. So she would have been 84, 85. I went over to her apartment one day, just check on her. She's reading a book about post-Civil War America. And I was like, Mom, why are you reading this? And she said, I just don't know enough about this part of our history. I was like, that's that lifelong learning kind of thing. So, man, so many good things. Krissa, what's your favorite quote from this book?
I'll tell you something that really jumped out at me. And I think, Mike, I've told you this story before, probably more than once, because I have a habit of doing that. But Randy, when you were talking about like motivating, I can't remember the exact words that you used, of course, but the lesson was, I think, having some type of prelude, like, I believe in you, I believe in your ability to do this. Let me help you get there. I had this boss, my first job out of college, and I performed well in this job. I wasn't failing or anything, but he called one time to give me some feedback, and the way he started the call was, "Hey, do you know how great you are?" And that's a weird question to answer. I said, "Thank you, I think, I don't want to answer that." And he said, "No, I'm serious. Like, you do this so well, you do this so well. And here's the thing, I believe in you so much, I think you could do even better." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And he said, "So I want you to start doing this too. I want when I can't even remember the specifics. So whenever you do this action, I want you to do it this way," or whatever it was. And I said, "Okay, yes, sir, no problem. Thank you so much for that." And I remember getting off the phone and I was so inspired and motivated and ready to take on this new task, whatever it was. And I thought, that was criticism, and it didn't feel like criticism. It felt like I just took a compliment, and it really stuck with me. We don't have to talk about how many years ago that was. It was a while back, but it stuck with me so much. I think about it on probably a monthly basis. Truly, that's how impactful it was for me.
Wow.
So when you were talking about that section, it really just kind of came back to the forefront of my brain.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic job again, Randy. I just want to say to those of you that are watching, if you would like to book Randy to share virtually with your organization, please contact us. There's a lot of books that he can do. We can even continue with have a discussion, a facilitated discussion with your team. Lots of different ways to use this. You'll get a link to it from today's webinar. You can share that, of course, in your organization along with the handout, because we really believe in this important matter of being a lifelong learner, and obviously reading books and discussing them is a big part of that. So I hope that you will do that, and I hope that you can join us next time for our Wednesday webinar with Ms. Terry Pennington, who is the Deputy CIO of the City of Austin, and she's going to be talking about ransomware. So really important topic. I think we all are concerned about this, and Terry is going to be sharing some things with us we'll all want to know. So thank you again, Randy and Krista. Of course, great to have you. Thank you for Kim and Lisa and all of those behind the scenes that make this work, and everyone that's been with us. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you down the road.